Hello and welcome to today's segment of Our Ventura TV. My name is George Alger. Today we're going to be talking about healing through music and art. And our guest today is Toni Jannotta, who is an international jazz singer, and she lives locally here in Ventura. Welcome, Toni.
Thank you, George. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you. So we've got a new book that you've authored. We have a music CD that accompanies that, and we have some other supporting materials here on the table. All right. Yay. Okay, cool. So let's open up this conversation of what is, and the book, by the way, is called My Little Heart, Ruthie. Mm-hmm. So tell us about what this is.
My Little Heart, Ruthie is a story rhyme that I wrote in 1992 when I was in counseling. And I was bringing up memories of some abuse I went through as a little girl. And everything at the time seemed very dark. And so I wrote this rhyme. And at the time I thought, well, I wrote this rhyme and I rewrote it 12 times and it just began to waltz. And all of a sudden my head was filled with these ideas. And I think that it was helping me heal as I tried to realize that I was not to blame for what had been done to me. So I took it and I started writing music for it, and then different things got in the way. I had to put it aside, and in 2014 I went back and I finished the music, and it features harp and trumpet, and they're the two main characters. And then I found an illustrator, then I recorded it, and then I created the finished product, a picture book, just like for kids, that comes with an album. So you're playing the album, and you're going through the different pages. So the album is narrated with this jazz-inspired musical suite.
Okay, good. So speak a little bit more about the tie with the book and the topic, healing through music and art.
As we were saying a couple of minutes ago, I think that when anybody has been hurt in their life, they always say to themselves, what did I do? What did I do to cause this? And sometimes they didn't do anything. In fact, a lot of times they didn't do anything. Maybe their choices weren't that great, but the other person chooses to abuse. Nobody says, please abuse me because I'm bored. You know, so this book is a way to heal myself and to try to heal others. And because I'm a musician, putting music to artwork in a book was just a natural progression. I believe that ever since my documentary, Voices of the Homeless, that my job as an artist is to help and heal society. Now, other people may not look at that so particularly, although, you know, no matter who you are, a major pop star or first chair violinist in the Cleveland Symphony, your music on some level is healing somebody in the audience. And this project is just more obvious to me, and I'm promoting it as a healing book. And I believe that whatever I do next, there's always going to be a healing component to my music. Even if it's not another healing book, or if it's not dedicated to healing some segment of society, I'm going to know that that's my job.
Cool. Now, in your opinion, your perspective, is art and music innately healing, or do you think that it requires a certain intent or a certain wavelength to sort of bring about that result?
Well, I do think intent is very important, because I think music and art affects. And depending on how it affects is determined by the intent. because there's some forms of music whose intention is to upset and rile people, and that works, and there are problems, or there's shootings and different things. So I do think intent is important. And sometimes the intent can be as simple as, I just want to make a pretty piece of music. And somebody out there is going to say, oh, Killing Me Softly, that's exactly how I felt, thank you. There is intent, and I do think intent's a big part of it, whether you're conscious of it or not. In my process, I just have become so much more conscious of what I'm doing and why.
Cool. Yeah, so in terms of the intent, I can see how you brought up some good examples there of how that could be readily differentiated. The idea that I'm wondering about now is part of that process of deciding for music to be healing. Is there some known, let's just take music for example, all right? So is there some known sounds that are healing, and if you integrate them into your music, you already know it's going to be healing? Or
I think so.
Okay, so speak to that.
I think so. At home, I have a healing bowl. Is that a singing bowl? People call it different things, and it's a brass bowl, and there's a certain way to play it, and out comes the sound and waves. And there's a slow wave as well as a fast wave. And people who meditate, I'm not a meditator, but people who meditate, they'll meditate to these sounds and it relaxes them, it gets their juices flowing again, it improves their body, it improves their breath. I intended, actually I didn't necessarily intend, but I certainly noticed along the way that the main character of my story is Ruthie. And Ruthie is a heart in isolation that has to figure out how to free herself. And she happens to be a harpist. And so when I heard, I composed this on the piano, but when I heard the harpist, Carol Robbins, when I heard her in the studio, and there, it's the same thing as the singing bowl. There's reverberations with the notes. So you hear these things called overtones. Are you familiar with overtones?
I'm only familiar with it, just barely.
Just barely. So it's a whole mathematical thing. But anyway, so you're hearing the overtones, and I played on this grand piano, and she was playing her, not concert harp, but one of her big harps. And it's just like, it really feels good. And you really feel something when she's playing. So those reverberations, those overtones that come, I believe, from acoustic instruments, because I don't believe, and it's not my place to say because I'm not an electronics person, but I believe that string to wood is the best way to find those overtones, or bells, or cymbals. The drummer here does on this piece does a lot of cymbal work, and there's lots of those overtones. Now, people listening to it aren't going to say, "Oh, I hear the overtone," but I believe that affects people. I hope that answered your question.
Well, in fact, what I'm getting from it is that there is more in the conveyance of the music than what is just immediately or obviously apparent.
It's below and above.
Okay.
It affects us on many levels, but we don't know what those levels are necessarily. We don't even have to know what those levels are, I don't think, if the music is doing its job, and that would be, in this case, say, to make you feel better, or to make you feel relaxed or happy, or whatever the music is, it's doing its job. You don't have to necessarily know about the other stuff, but whenever you find a form or a style of music that happens to be your favorite, it's affecting you on many, many levels. And a lot of times the levels it's affecting us on are hitting us, I think, unconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, at least I can say, in having limited knowledge of the technical aspects of music, but at least I can say, yeah, there's so much music that just carries me. You know, it's just, I don't really care why, and it's all different genres, and it's just, this has sort of captivated me, and I love it, and I'm just willing to sort of be with that music for a period of time, and yeah, certain music makes me feel better and uplifting.
Yeah.
Certain music isn't, and yet it's not necessarily negative, but yeah, you're right. Some things can agitate you and yet maybe motivate you to a certain extent.
There was a fascinating book called, I can't remember what it was called, something through water. And it was an experiment where this guy played heavy metal, he played classical music, and took pictures of frozen water as it was unfreezing, and there were different patterns. And you saw how the vibrations of the music were affecting these patterns of water. And some were beautiful, and others were all chaotic. You know, it fascinates me. As a musician, and this does not really speak to your question, but as a musician, when I was writing this, and I play violin and I mess around on the piano, but I'm not a piano player. But I wrote this on the piano, and I had to write it by ear. Long story short, I had to memorize it and take it somewhere and record it, and then it was transcribed to several pages of a piano score. But when I was writing it, it would just grab me, and I'd read the words, and I'd say, and then I'd get stuck. And it was like, you talk about being a conduit for the music. I'm waiting. Okay, nothing's happening. And I assume that's what it's like for a writer. Because I was so intense when I wrote the poem that it just all piled out in maybe a sitting. And then I rewrote it to give it shape and form.
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying, yeah. Particularly in terms of writing. Sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
So we're just about out of time here. I'm wondering if we can get a website or websites that people could go to for more information, and if there's a summating message you'd like to convey to the viewers.
The websites I'd like to say is ToniJannotta.com. So that's ToniJannotta.com, and /Ruthie is where this is. And then my illustrator, who I think is the best illustrator ever born, the amazing millennial Jennifer Mones, and hers is Jennifer Mones.com. So I would love to promote Jennifer. And I think going back to the book and music and art, this has shown me that it's okay to take my music and the artwork and to remind people that any abuses they suffered in their life, you're going to heal, but just don't assume it was your fault.
Thank you, Toni.
Thank you.
This is George Alger signing off for this segment of Our Ventura TV. Until we meet again.